You know, before I started fishing this morning, when I was at home yesterday, and I got home late because I was steelhead fishing, of course, so I'm trying to take advantage of the season, I realized that I had a couple of half hitches in my leader, my fluorocarbon leader, between my swivel and my hook. And you might be okay leaving those little half hitches in. You know, I landed one or two fish and those half hitches got really tight. I was able to undo one by putting the hook in the actual half hitch and opening it up a little bit and then pushing the line through. But if you hooked a really big fish, you know, anything like over 12 pounds, 12 to 17 pounds, the line might get cut because half hitches are not very good knots because the line goes over another section of line at 90 degrees and it can cut the line below it. So what I've done, I re-spooled with a quality fluorocarbon material. So this is it here. And because I'm dealing with a lot of wood, I've actually gone and used a little bit heavier. This is 10-pound test. So, and it's clear. The reason for the fluorocarbon is a couple of reasons. One, it is clear, but the water's murky, so it doesn't really matter. Two, it's a little bit stiffer than my main line. I'm using that Suffolk Siege line, which is one of my favorite for steelhead fishing because it has floating qualities when you're using a center pin. And also it keeps the hook straight. So the tip I'm going to give you now is kind of important because it has to do with the hook. So this is the hook I'm using, and I'm going to try to stick it in my thumb, but not too far. So I cry like a girl, okay? That's the hook right there. That's number 12. It's a VMC hook. It's very sharp, and it's just a classic steelhead hook as far as I'm concerned. So what I'm gonna do, because I don't want the spawn sack to pivot around, I don't want the hook with the spawn sack to pivot around the knot if the knot is just tied like a standard knot through the eye, I'm gonna use something called a perfect snell. So to do that, I'm gonna put the line through the hook there. And by the way, you can go online to see all the different knots. There's a really good site called Animated Knots, which shows you literally in motion, you know, still frames, how to tie the knot. So I make a loop and then I wrap it about 6 or 7 times around towards my finger. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to pull the tag end, and just before I tighten it, I'm going to wet it with a little bit of saliva, just like that, and I'm going to tighten it. Now, you might say, well, why are you using that knot as opposed to using a trilene knot, improved clinch, Palomar knot? Well, I'll explain it to you. So I'm just going to cut the tag off. So it's, I'm going to leave about a 1/4 inch of tag, because you never know when you fight a big fish, you get snagged. Sometimes the tag can slip through. So the reason I've tied that, a perfect snell, is, you see that way that hook is laying on the line? I'm going to try to put it over my vest so you can see it. So it's always straight. The hook doesn't pivot around the eye of the hook. So, and at the other end, at this end here, where I've got my small swivel, I've used the trilene knot, which is one of my favorite knots. And again, I've left about a 1/4 inch of tag. And then you see I've got my first sinker. If the water's really fast, this leader is about, I'm going to say, 14 to 16 inches long. I may put another really small shot right here to keep my spawn sack from being down close to the bottom. So number one, I would suggest that, you know, if you just steelhead fish with monofilament line, it's fine. But, and if the water's especially murky like it is this morning because we had heavy rains last night, it's fine also. But it's much better if you use fluorocarbon material for a few reasons. When you fight the fish and you get into some wood and stuff, that last 16 inches can be critical for you landing a fish. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my spawn sack on there. And you know, I love my carrying cases to be narrow, not too deep, and to be able to lock it, like literally. So when you're using some, I'm going to call them gunge bags, you know, because sometimes bags that you use for a while and they've been in your pocket, they get a little juicy because some of the eggs get broken. So I've got a selection here, some tied in a chartreuse scarfing material, some tied in the spawny netting, or, you know, there's spawny blackbird. There's a few companies that make the netting. I think there might even be a no name brand. So those are better if the water's clear. So this is the chartreuse sack right here. It's kind of almost glows, and I've got it just tagged on. That's how I keep it usually when I you know, scoop it out of my little container. Now I'm just going to sew it around the edges, And I punctured one egg already, just punctured a second one. And one thing that I like to do is keep my hook exposed. I don't like to bury my hook in the spawn sack, especially when the water's dirty. Because a lot of times these steelhead bite really lightly. And you can see that's just sewn with the hook sticking out. And it's going to stay like that pretty well. So when the steelhead bite lightly, you know, they don't really swallow the roe bag. A lot of times they're hooked right here on the edge of the lip, usually on the top, or around the snout, around the maxillary, and sometimes on the bottom lip. But it's when the water's clear that they actually take the spawn sack and the hook is inside on the roof of the mouth normally, especially if you're using a float. So now that my challenge is to set the right depth on the float when I get on the river, and also to choose the right location, so that not only can I hook a fish, but I can fight it and land it. And when you're dealing with lower sections of tributaries, like here in southern Ontario, in Lake Ontario, we only have an open season from a certain section downstream, which is very close to the Lake Ontario mouth. So this area usually has a lot of mature trees, broken trees. You can see right here, the tree that's right behind me, probably hit by lightning or just got old. A lot of the trees are willow, so they're not very strong. So another thing I would suggest, I don't know if you ever heard of a widow maker. If you see trees, especially as we get on in spring, that don't have leaves on them, you know, you're fishing after the regular opening, and it's windy out, do not walk underneath these. They can be 2 or 3 feet in diameter or bigger. But if they're old and they're rotten on the inside, with strong winds, they can fall over. That's why they call them widow makers. Because guys that are married sometimes lose their life. So I've learned that, you know, and I've heard them crashing. It sounds like a blast, a cannon blast, when you're fishing on a tributary. So when they fall, a lot of them fall into the river. So you'll see as we walk down, there's lots of debris and log jams and wood and trees in the water. So the fish can negotiate around and underneath that. But as fishermen, you don't want to be above that, even if you have a net, because a lot of times those fish will run down into those obstructions. So choosing your spot before you start fishing is very, very important. Kind of like setting yourself up if you're playing pool for the next shot. You don't just shoot. You already think ahead what your next shot is going to be. Okay, let's go downriver. So we've got a really nice pool here. I'd love to fish it. We're only up about maybe, I'm going to say 1 kilometer from Lake Ontario, maybe half a kilometer. But you can see there's wood to the right of me. So there's another run that I would have loved to fish right there. But it's not really good for landing a fish because that wood, I'm pointing at it with my rod, comes right across. This is a gorgeous pool right here, and it's probably holding fish. But look at the log jam that's there. So we got the trees and stuff. So you have to be very, very careful. You know, I must tell you, if you watch the beginning of the video and you took the time to read that historical sign, this is where I learned how to steelhead fish and trout fish in my teen years. Just gotta negotiate a big log here. Believe it or not, it was around 1970, 71. And back then, nobody really knew much in Ontario about steelhead fishing. You know, we'd be reading magazines about people in Oregon and Washington State catching steelhead using eggs. I mean, my first time steelheading, I didn't even know how to tie a roe bag. I had some stocking material and I cut squares and I put the roe in there and I kind of rolled it like a cigarette and tied it at both ends. But you know what? I got my first steelhead. It ended up in the Oshawa Times, about 1971, and it was 21 inches long. And I remember I was by myself. I thought I had this monster fish on because everybody was catching brook trout and they were catching, inland brown trout and also some very small rainbows. And there were really no steelhead because the big stockings didn't really start. So that fish ended up in the paper. I got it mounted. Somebody did a cement mound. I don't know if you know what that is, when they actually fill the fish, the skin of the fish, with cement after they clean it. And I don't know where it's gone to. I wish I would have had it now. So I've got a lot of memories here. And this is where I met Wild Bill. Okay, so he's my best steelhead buddy. He looks a little bit like the guys from Duck Dynasty now. I'm going to try to post a picture at the end of the video, you know. So you think about it, I've been fishing here for over 50 years. So yeah, I'm a dinosaur. I'm getting up there, right? So Bill and I had a chance to fish the other day. We're going to be fishing again tomorrow. So we can't stop. We got this passion for it. So here, you can see behind me here, this is a great run. And it's kind of open. If I hook a fish here, I've got, I'm going to say 200 or 300 yards, no major obstructions. And if you look in the water is pretty murky. We had heavy rain last night. Let me just close by here so you can get a good look. So it's a little deceiving. It looks like it's, you know, about maybe 3 or 4 inch visibility, but the main flow out there is probably a lot dirtier. I think this is a good place to start. Because it rained yesterday and it's during the week, I don't see any other fishermen. I saw one fisherman already leave when I parked my car. But during the week, especially when we've had heavy rains, a lot of guys won't come down. But you know what? I love the challenge of fighting even one fish. So here we go. Wasn't doing much talking there because the fish was giving me such a good fight. Just going to give you a quick look and then we're going to be releasing it. There's a nice prime spring steelhead, fresh run. And it takes a lot of work. One thing I've got to admit, I fish different runs, different pools, different sections, different areas, and look at, it's a beautiful fish. You can see that netting material just in the roof of the mouth. Man, that was a big fight. Beautiful fish. You know what they say in Looney Tunes? That's all, folks. I gotta release this fish.